On this liturgy this morning, we do something that we typically do during Lent, on the Sundays of Lent, which is prepare a second host, a second body of Christ that is tinctured, which is a fancy name for saying that the bread, when it becomes the body of Christ, afterwards we take the blood of Christ and we pour it on top of the body, and it dries and it remains inside the tabernacle, which is the little church, the little golden silver church that sits on top of the altar table. And that is the reserved Holy Communion for baptisms, for hospital visits, and for other necessities in the church year when a liturgy might not have the time to perform the liturgy to meet the needs of someone in an emergency. So the reserved sacrament remains on the altar table, and then it is used by the priest to distribute at the various sacraments as far as baptism, and also in hospital settings most commonly. So the reserved sacrament that is left over from this past year, so inside the tabernacle is actually the communion that was prepared last year, last Holy Thursday. It's always prepared on Holy Thursday. So during Lent, we prepare a second host for the pre-sanctified liturgy. So the first Sunday of Lent, from Sunday of Orthodoxy on, we prepare an additional host. It remains on the altar table, and then for the pre-sanctified liturgy, that's the body that we use and the blood that we use. But now what happens with this host is it remains here for the entire year. So last year's host that was prepared, there's just a small portion that's left over from last year from using it throughout the year. That is not served or distributed, I should say, during Holy Communion to the faithful, but it's rather consumed by the priest after at the finishing of the chalice on the side of the altar. Now, many times people have said, well, does it become moldy? What happens to it? It's an amazing gift that God has in this sacrament, that the bread and the wine do not mold, they don't turn green, they don't decompose or turn black or whatever might happen to food in your refrigerator that's kept, where sometimes we might have a gallon of milk, or you might have a loaf of bread, and it might be very close to the due date and it's already turned. This host that is inside the tabernacle is 365 days, probably a little bit more than that because Easter was earlier last year. And once it's placed in warm water or inside wine, it immediately becomes soft again and as fresh as the day that it was consecrated. So it is a beautiful gift. It does require some preparation to properly prepare it. You can't just seal it up in a box as it's wet right now, but we let it dry. Some priests actually toast it, which they put it in a toaster oven and will put it on a low heat to dry it out quicker. What has worked here is leaving it in this octagonal box that we have. It's a reliquary box, and with the lid open, and within about a week or so, it's completely dry, and then it is placed inside of the tabernacle on the altar. So this is the one liturgy during the year where we prepare for the rest of the year for the reserved sacrament. So on this day where we have this beautiful liturgy as a reminder of the Last Supper, and as we heard last night, which is actually the orthros for today, for Holy Thursday, we hear about the Last Supper, the institution of Christ distributing his body and his blood in this sanctified and blessed wine and bread that he gave to his disciples as the institution of the first Holy Communion. So that's why we prepare Holy Communion for the rest of the year on this day where we remember Christ's Last Supper.